The following is a presentation of the ForceCenter podcast feed.
From the center of the galaxy, this is a ForceCenter podcast feed. I'm Ket Knapsack for another edition, the 116th edition of Star Wars Rank. This is going to be, I think, a pretty special one, maybe even an emotional one, and as always, fun and enlightening. So to do that show, to make this list, to rank Star Wars today is Joseph Scrimshaw. Hello.
I am excited to have some fun emotions.
I got to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't know how it can go. I could see some tears happening today, at least on my end. I'm an emotional cat sometimes when it comes to Star Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you pitched this, I at first really thought of it intellectually. Mm-hmm. And then as I went over the list, I was like, oh, no, this is not going to be an intellectual discussion.
Yes.
This is going to be an emotional discussion.
It will indeed. And a little column A, little column B, and C, D, and E. So what we're ranking today is... well, I always love kind of finding the right title in the moment. Our favorite Star Wars deaths, the best Star Wars deaths that matter. I don't know. We're talking about death today in Star Wars, Joseph. And there is, a lot of choices of death in them Thar Wars, yeah?
Yeah, I think that you should title this one Best Period Deaths Period Ever Period.
Best Deaths Ever. Yes, indeed.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a hard one to talk about because death is such a big part of Star Wars. And I love that we're just kind of going at it of like, well, what does that mean? Which deaths affected us? How? And it's not like coolest or goriest or most emotional. You're just saying the deaths that affected us, right?
Yeah, and this actually, we were doing the main show last week, which is the characters we want to return, and some of those characters were dead, and we want either them to return or maybe not to return. Maybe their characters show up a younger version of themselves, another version of the story. And I was thinking, oh man, I don't know if we've ever really talked about the deaths in Star Wars. And we talked about them on other shows, but in terms of ranking them, we always try to approach the rank with a fun tongue in cheek. It's not fact, it's our opinion, but hey, that word rank is a powerful word in podcasting. So let's get to it. And you took to that idea, and I took to the idea, and to pull back the curtain and show us making this tasty omelet here is we don't tell each other, hey, here's what the list will be about other than the title. And so our lists are a little bit based on, like you said, a little intellectual flavor, but definitely it starts to veer towards the emotional. These are deaths that affect the story. And because of that, we always like to maybe put things in the Hall of Fame here, as we say in Star Wars Rank. We're not necessarily doing that today, but we're going to along the way acknowledge some of the big deaths that you can't turn away from, that you can't ignore because they're so powerful and they're such great characters. Some are on the list, some are off the list. But at the end of the day, Joseph, to let the audience in on this one, we just really did go where our Star Wars love and hearts took us.
Yeah, no, I really just closed my eyes and listened to my inner truth. Listen to the Force speak through me. And I think what I ended up coming up with is deaths that, to me, represent the different ways that Star Wars can handle death or, tell stories through the idea of death. And I think that's where I ended up going of oh, but I have to include one like that, or I have to include one like that,
Yeah. And I always, I always think of one of my favorite movies is and books is High Fidelity, and they're always ranking top 5 bands and music, and sometimes there's you're being creative, you're sneaking in something new with an old list, and I don't ever want to be too cute on Star Wars Ranked, and so I was like, let me not get obscure deaths. But then I really started thinking about there's some things I'm going to talk about here today that are quote unquote obscure in the bigger Star Wars story, but they got me. And that just, I think, speaks to Star Wars is just this big, giant saga and myth that really, once it is in your veins, it affects you no matter how big or small the story is to you.
Yeah, exactly. It's all one big story when we're looking at it this way.
Let's dive on in the best Star Wars deaths, our favorite Star Wars deaths, the deaths that move us. This episode has many titles because there's a lot to get to. Joseph, we're going to work our way 5 to 1, beginning with your number 5.
My number 5 death in Star Wars. Still a weird sentence to say, but there you go. My number 5 death in Star Wars is one to me that represents the horror of death, the brutality of it, and a moment where death is kind of real in Star Wars, kind of one foot in strange fantasy land, and in some ways, the death that started it all, and that is the death of Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. My mind went to that partially because of its sheer importance to the story of the very first Star Wars film, but also that image and how much that image it does get joked about. There's that meme that goes around of the Owen and Beru action figures. That's just that charred skeleton.
Yeah. I love getting shared that every 2 years like it's new.
It happens, right? Have you seen this? And every once in a while when somebody sends have you seen this? You haven't seen it, and it's nice. But the charred corpses of Owen Beru, I have seen that in action figure form, as well as celluloid and digital form. I think for me, what's some of the powerful things about it is just in terms of storytelling, starting there, it is the motivation, right? It is the sort of reality that the big world is going to come for Luke eventually. That Luke has this power. He's eventually going to have to go out into the galaxy and choose how to use it. And you can't just hide on a farm. You can't be not involved. Eventually, destiny, life, the larger world is going to come for you. And this is this just brutal, horrific version of being pushed out into the world, right? Where he thinks like, I can't. I can, take you as far as Anchorhead. I can't go with you on some adventure because I'm tied to this place. And then it's just shocking, horrific. The tie is severed, and this young character has to start their journey. So there's that storytelling power of both in some ways the launching point for Luke's journey. He shifts from having this family, these adoptive parents, to wanting to fulfill this idea of who his father was. He immediately says, I want to become a Jedi like my father. There's no family here for me now. There's nothing here for me now. My old life burned up with my, parents, with my aunt and uncle. And now I'll go out into the galaxy and I will fulfill this destiny of becoming like this father that I never knew. So it's definitely the launching point of his, actual journey, his emotional journey in lots of ways. And then I think just as an image, we generally talk about Star Wars, A New Hope it's this just fun, grab you, bring you to the edge of the seat and zip you through it. It's an adventure. It's a simple, fun story about light and dark. And those things are all true. But there are those moments of like, yep, we don't really deal with the full emotional fallout of it, but that whole entire planet is blown up. Luke's aunt and uncle do die in what looks like a horrific, painful way. It's this one moment where, even going back to the first film of, yes, it is just a rip-roaring, whiz-bang adventure, but it is also something that deals with real things. It is for kids and it isn't. And I went through that as a young person who was really ready and anxious to get out into the world and discover my power, like Luke Skywalker. I spent a long time really relating to Luke, staring at those twin suns. And I almost always had to say to myself in my own head, I don't want my parents burned up, but I don't want that to be the inciting incident. There's a real power that those burning skeletons is what frees Luke to have adventure. It makes Star Wars from the very beginning. Yes, it's for kids, but it's a story that also wants to open the possibility that kids can wrestle with darkness and trauma, as well as adventure.
Wow, that's a good old ForceCenter well said on just the entire picture of why it works and why it's important and why. Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like I don't have a little chuckle at some of those Star Wars memes, and this one included about the burnt skeletons being action figures. The Lego set that's just Alderaan destroyed with bricks, or the desk.
It's funny stuff.
I can laugh at it. I'll always laugh at Star Wars. But one of the reasons I don't, you touched upon it too, of just the image of it. As a young kid, this affected me. And I always go back to that this moment. It's brutal. They're burned skeletal corpses. We've seen the stormtroopers and Vader by this point in the story. If you're 7 or 8, 9 and you're watching this can be potentially traumatic. And I always was moved by that in that sense. It was a little bit of a horror show for me of that's just miserable because you said it too, like I got my parents and I don't want them laser bolted to a burning death. And I'm like, what? And it stayed with me, especially because you saw, Beru making the blue milk, and it's, it wasn't the happiest family dinner, but it was a family dinner. And I always just felt sad for Beru and Owen, that it affected me in that way, that those poor people were trampled underfoot by this whole story, but inspirational as it moves Luke forward too. And I'm with you on staring at the twin sons, and just now the adventure has begun. Whether it's the right foot or wrong foot for Luke, you said he's chasing after the idea of being this great warrior like his father, which he's going to learn a little bit more about that later. But I've never moved too far from that for this death. It's pretty traumatic.
Yeah. And I think it's also it's visually fascinating, just that Star Wars, the film, so much of what gets set and established in that film is this entire world, and some of it is just never changes. It's the cornerstone. But then there's also stuff that's like, they're making this film on a budget and fast. And like the image of that death is not like this one didn't take on. Like the lights on the Death Star, that's what Imperial and many Republic lights are like forever. Right. This is how lightsabers work forever. Yeah. Those are, Jedi and farmer robes forever. All sorts of things get established. And it doesn't become like, oh yeah, when characters die in Star Wars, they're always smoking skeletons. Yeah. It's this weird image that kind of stands by itself.
Yeah. Totally understand what you mean. That's totally true. It is pretty graphic versus some of the nice clean deaths we get later on.
Yes. And with that, I'll relinquish. This one was a powerful one to start with.
No, great start to the list here. From there, we'll go to my number 5. And this one is a little bit more recent. It is the death of a true hero, Paige Tico, in The Last Jedi. A lot has been said about this death here on this channel. It's one I've talked about before. It is its own little short film in a way. And I'm talking about just the ballad of Paige Tico, not just the opening sequence of that movie. It has shot so well, just the pacing, the music, the heroic actions, the idea of Paige being knocked down and having to kind of get back up and climb up to face her destiny, climb up to make this what eventually is this big sacrifice. There's a lot of inspiration to be taken from that, but just the way it was shot, the slow motion, her opening her eyes, sound, being, just this vacuum of sound at one point, and that X-Wing flying underneath it. It's just so compelling in its own way. Like I said, a little short film. And then her sacrifice, we know what it means for Rose Tico, but what it means for this story, that Rian Johnson has this great, just classic Star Wars opening, a big battle. You got Tally, Lentra, you got Poe being a hero. And the lesson of that is, even though this was maybe a necessary battle from a certain point of view, maybe not Poe going all the way, but even then he would argue, hey, we need to get rid of this Super Star Destroyer here, the big one there, the Dreadnought. You don't just see it from a distance. You don't just see exploding bombers and then Poe comes back and is taught this lesson from Leia. The face of that loss is Paige Tico. The face of that sacrifice is Paige Tico. You literally are right in her eyes. You're watching her die. You're watching her give her life for this greater cause. And then it matters greatly to the idea of what a hero is, the rest of this story, what a hero is, what Poe, his failure in leadership, Finn, what he has to learn directly from Rose Tico, who, me and my sister heard about the Finn, and you're the great hero. And really, he grows into that, and he's on this journey to become that. And I do believe Finn is heroic along the way, but becomes a hero later. Part of my own interpretation of that, but to have Paige represent that, to just this, like I keep saying, this short little film, but it's just the moment it switches, and the moment it focuses on her, and Poe's like, "Hey, Paige," and you flip to her and the gunner, the bubble, and she looks up and she sees what she has to do, and she's a little overwhelmed. She's afraid, and that's all of us having to get back up and climb up and face it. And I hope we all don't explode as we go into a dreadnought. But it was a valuable lesson that set the tone for the film. Cool. Pew, 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 big excitement, but there's a lesson in that, and this is the face of that lesson. So that's why I'll always remember the death of Paige Tico.
Very, very well said. There's so much to love in this, and I agree with you. I love it when you describe it as a short film. And there's so many beats where it feels impossible, right? And like she could give up. Like, I think that's what's so well constructed about it, of the kicking the ladder to try to get it to drop, the trick shot where it looks like she missed it. It's just really well done to really heighten that feeling of you could give up, right?
Yeah.
If this was me trying to fix my printer, I would give up, right? But like, that's kind of a joke, but I mean that in that it reminds me of those moments in life where like there's been higher stakes and I can't give up in a situation where I normally would,
Yeah.
I think a couple things that it really does well for me are, I love that Poe shouts, "It's all down to you."
Yeah.
There's so much storytelling in Star Wars that values connection and being together, and the need for a group to work together in order to accomplish goals. But Star Wars also celebrates the individual, that we have responsibility and that we need to be our best, and Poe kind of saying, we're all in this together, but actually now it's only down to you, this one person whose job it wasn't even on the bomber to initially drop the bombs, right?
Yeah.
It's all down to you is kind of a theme statement that our individual choices matter, which is going to connect her directly to Finn. And then one of the other things that Last Jedi really wrestles with, I really think of Last Jedi is not subverting Star Wars just to do it. It is taking all the big ideas of Star Wars and questioning them in order to validate them. That's my opinion of The Last Jedi. And I think one of the big things, particularly connected to Finn, is, does it matter why we fight? Or is it just, Team Red and Team Blue blowing each other up again and again?
Yeah.
And the fact that we go through this short film, as you say so well, and the final moment is Paige knowing she made a sacrifice and touching that necklace, which symbolizes not only her connection with her sister, but the reason that these two just normal people, of Paige and Rose, joined the fight, because of what was happening to their planet under the cruelty of the First Order. And it's just this little visual thing that, feels meaningful. It feels human the very first time you're watching the film. But then when you watch it again and really absorb the story, that touching of the necklace is about this person knowing that she made the choice to fight for a reason, and it matters.
Yeah, great pull connecting to just the planet that they're from and the reason they're in the fight. That's a great little detail in it here, and comes from knowing the whole story there, and it all adds up. And yeah, I agree with you on subverting to validate is a bumper sticker way of kind of summarizing it all. But that's a lot of what this movie is, and a lot of the big themes of just like, let's really dig into all the things that we grew up with as Star Wars fans, or are growing up if you're whenever you discover Star Wars. And now you have this, and we didn't necessarily have it. And I think Return of the Jedi does a great job of why we fight and how we fight, and a weapon thrown down to win the day. All these kind of big concepts are there, which I think it's the connection there too. But yeah, that's why, again, to summarize, it's just like this an amazing sequence. And me is kind of it's always weird to say World War II buff, because it's an actual real war with millions upon millions of casualties there and everything. But like, the bomber thing and everything, you're like, ooh, war, pew, 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 playground fun as a kid. And to take all that and to really zoom in, focus in on this person and their sacrifice, and then having Poe being like, great, right? Slap in the face. No, we gotta continue the fight in our own way. So anyways, I don't want to remix it. I love it. Well said, sir. And that is why Paige Tico is my number 5, which means we're up to your number 4.
My number 4 is one that absolutely had to be on the list for me because it was when I just closed my eyes and was honest with myself. It is the one that came to my head, and it is a very different kind of death, I think, and that is the passing of Yoda into the Force in Return of the Jedi.
I wanted to cut you. I love that you chose this because when you sent your list over to me, I was like, how did I forget about this death? It's such a different Star Wars death. I almost forgot about it. So anyways, continue, sir. Great choice.
Yeah. Well, and when I send it over, like, this is kind of a fun game of, having podcasts together for a long time and knowing different emotional memories, that there was a part of me was like, I know you have this emotional connection because your sister ran out of the theater, right?
Yeah. Screaming, Yodio, Yodio.
So I was like, I wonder if Ken's going to have Yodio on the list. I think for me, what I like about this is it is almost the polar opposite of the Owen and Beru death. It is definitely sad, but it is, unlike this brutality inflicted upon Owen and Beru with just horrible cruelty by, an imperial regime, this is one of the most natural, peaceful deaths in Star Wars, right? It's still sad because we love Yoda. It still has, great narrative purpose in the real hero's journey stuff of, like, now the student Luke is entirely, quote unquote, alone.
Right.
We of course learn he never is, but that's the way it makes him feel in that moment. That he is the last Jedi at this time. But I think there's a lot in it that has always resonated with me over the years because of how, like, clear Yoda is about, I'm I'm 900 years old. I've had a really long life. This is totally natural. This is totally to be expected. It's, it's okay to be sad, but, take what you've learned from me and move forward with it. I think that just the piece with which he says, that is the way of things, that is the way of the Force, has always just stuck with me because it is so peaceful, of embracing the parts of the natural world, or even a kind of ourselves that are like, there's no point in gnashing our teeth about this. This is totally natural. And I think it's also, it is really sad. And I think this scene has probably made a million kids cry across generations. It was hard for me. I loved Yoda. And it was sad and difficult. But I think that there's some peace in it, in that the scene is not any sort of, like, scary version of death. It's not violent. He's not raging against the dying of the light. He's still really himself. He's still imparting wisdom. He's still kind of poking at Luke. I love that moment when Luke's like, then I am a Jedi. And Yoda's like, whoa, you think you're a Jedi? Do you? Like, he's, even on his literal deathbed, he's still full of personality and charm and whimsy. And I think that allows you to sort of accept it, Yeah. And then I think the other two big things for me is just total headcanon. I really like the idea that Yoda has been sick. It is his natural time. And he's just been holding on for this one last conversation with Luke. And what, in some ways, a joyful last conversation with Luke. There's a lot of, back and forth. There's a lot about Yoda still being like, it's too bad that you rushed off and you found out he was your father this way. And this revelation that it's kind of because Yoda's concerned about Luke. Like, it's a huge burden, and it's too bad you have to feel it all on your shoulders now. But there is a real also, like, you've already learned everything you need to. You have all the tools you need. Now you just need to go out and use them. And even a kind of a holding out hope of, Yoda isn't saying, like, yeah, he's your dad, but you got to kill him. He's just like, you have to face him. That's the challenge you have to go through. So he held out for this last conversation in my headcanon. And it's a conversation where I think Yoda gets some validation too, of like, look at this much, much more mature, calm, wise, Jedi-like young man that returned to me. Yeah. Like, I was afraid it was going to go the other way. And what great validation that, a Luke that can go, I'm sorry, with that amount of weight is the Luke that came back to him.
Yeah.
It's got to be a nice thing for Yoda to see. And then my final thing is just, this is one of the great, if you were going to do a play of Star Wars and you wanted to choose some scenery, this is the death scene, right? The fighting for the last syllable of Skywalker, right? It is just, in terms of Star Wars, also just being a drama. This is the, like, I am going to use my last breath to tell you the last thing I feel like you should know.
I love that. Hi, my name's Ken. I'm here to audition for the part. I'll be reading the Yoda dying monologue from Return of the Jedi.
If I went back to doing a theater and audition as just an actor, I think I might try that. And at least they would remember me as they told me to leave.
Well, sir, that's just downright beautiful. And yeah, you're right. Almost the exact opposite of the Owen and Beru death, but equally as important and maybe even more important in the sense of, I look at the Kenobi death in New Hope, and it's a valuable lesson for young kids on a journey. The Beru and Owen one is there too, but we're all supposed to go on from that. We're all supposed to, it is the life and the life cycle, and New Hope kind of has all that, the hero's journey, but also just the kid going in the real world journey as we know. But to come back later in this film, and you're right, this is not a violent death. This is not going out in a blaze of glory. This is what's supposed to happen, which is also a valuable lesson for us. And yeah, I'm 7 watching this, and my sister's scream crying and being taken out of the Fair Oaks Theater in Grand Avenue in Arroyo Grande, California, in 1983. But I whether I know it or not, I'm being given those lessons to learn from. And they're not easy, and death is not easy, nor should it ever be easy. But this isn't easy. And it seems, I feel for Luke in that moment. And you're so right to point out that he's come back. And I love, too, that we've got, what do we got, 6-8 months, 9 months, a year between these films?
Yeah, I think it's a year now in current canon.
Yeah, and the comics are in that phase right now. And there's going to be a lot of crazy adventures and comic book adventures. But I love that Yoda's just over there waiting, biding his time, knowing his light is fading. That's pretty powerful. I think you're right. I'm there with your headcanon on that moment of just, he's holding on and can die knowing that he's done everything he can do and maybe needs to do to help this young man on it. And it affects me because Luke feels not helpless, but he's so on his own and feels alone in that moment. And he tries to face it. There's a little bit of okay, got it. I know what I got. Now I get it. And I love a lot about that. It's such a great scene. So, yeah. And it just is the question of, who Luke will ultimately be is still up in the air until the end of the film. But I just love that Yoda has so much evidence that his greatest fears aren't coming true. Yeah.
About Luke.
Yeah. When you add in some additional canon material of Yoda wanting to train Leia, that's Qui-Gon's blanket. There's a lot going on in this scene.
There's a lot. And who knows, if you really want to add that in, that's Yoda's last line of, like, look, if you screw it up, he does say to pass on what you've learned. So he does have Leia on the mind as well, quite a bit, and even if you don't factor in the recent canon that Yoda, pined to train Leia over Luke, even just reading the film, pass on what you've learned, the importance of telling Luke that there is another, does speak to the importance of Leia to Yoda.
Yeah, absolutely. Great number 4. All right, we're going to my number 4. We're still kind of, page Tico, I guess take that back. We're in the original trilogy era right now. And this is one I try not to be what I think is quote unquote too cute. I don't want to list a favorite song that's a B-side no one's heard of, but this is one that's not celebrated too much, I know, but we've talked about it here, and this is one of my favorite moments, so no surprise for some people. But going to the Eclipse short story by Madeleine Roux in the first Star Wars from a certain point of view, this is the death of Bail and Breha Organa, their final moments. If you've never had a chance to read this story, those From a Certain Point of View books are kind of wild. They're canon adjacent at times, and even we kind of pick and choose what we believe here at ForceCenter because they get a little wild. But I've always loved this one, and I've said before, I'll tell you a little bit more of the story. Disclosure: I'm friends with Madeline, and haven't talked to her in a couple of years, but she used to live out here in LA for a while. We actually drove down to Star Wars Celebration 2015 together, she moved out of the area, and then I saw her again in Orlando 2017, and she said, "Hey, can't tell anybody, but I'm writing this story. I'm on the list." And I was so excited for it. But it's a friend, you're like, good. I hope it's really good. I trust her as an author. She's a great author. But I was like, oh, cool. And then this story blew me away. And it's still one of my favorite pieces. And I can never watch New Hope and not think about this, which is why I love it so much. And it is a simple short story of Breha Organa trying to do her daily business as the Queen of Alderaan there, ruling party of Alderaan. You go through a lot of it. And a lot of it, she had talked to Madeline, I talked to Claudia Gray, and they shared some notes on Leia, Princess of Alderaan. So there's a very similar vibe to the character there. And it starts with her underneath the beautiful sun, on the sun peeking through on a day of Alderaan. But of course, she's worried about Bail. She's worried about Leia. They have not heard from her. They don't know what's going on. And the story starts with that sun, the natural, beautiful sun of Alderaan, and ends with what is described as a, quote, unnatural eclipse that happens fast. And that is, of course, the Death Star arriving. But in between then, you have Bail returning, delivering the news that Leia is missing, the Tantive 4 is destroyed. They don't know anything. And Breha spends the entire story needing to know if her daughter is alive, needing to know as a mother, as a rebel, as a her and her husband helping form what's going on, but she needs to know, and she can't get that proof. A couple of days pass, and that's when the Death Star arrives. And then as you're reading the story, the tension, because you know what's happening clearly, and the way it's described and the way it's played out and the way it ends with Bail and her and their arms together, spending, and Bail even says, at least we'll be with each other. And in the final moments, kind of the realization that Breha spends this entire little story here needing to know her daughter's alive, and the Death Star arriving confirms it. And the conversation, the final words, Bail saying she lives, and he repeats that twice, and Breha says, "I know," and it's a great use of "I know," which is tradition in Star Wars. And then just the beautiful but also brutal description of their death as they're removed into oblivion, basically. And those are the final words, the hope. And this is truly truly one of those stories, a Star Wars story. There, it is. Syncs up well with a lot of other stuff going Rogue One and all those kind of things. I can't ever escape it. It can move me to tears when I read. I just read it this morning and had one of those big gulps in my throat. It's so beautiful. It's so heartbreaking. And I can never not think of it when I see New Hope. So that is my number 4, Bail and Breha Organa.
I think that is a deep dive worth visiting, because maybe in terms of how you find the story, it's in this book that swings wildly from the super goofy and the super fun and the super wild to the super emotional. It's one short story, but in terms of like where it sits in the importance of Star Wars, it's huge, right? Yeah. Bail and Breha and their raising of Leia and the true significance of Alderaan, it's huge. It's all really huge. And I remember really loving that story. I have not revisited any of those stories. I need to pick up a certain point of view from my shelf and just go through and read the ones that resonated with me, and have a good reread. Am I remembering correctly that they are out on a balcony as the end is coming?
Yes, they are out on their balcony there, up on the apartments, the royal apartments, if you will. And the imagery there, especially the end of Revenge of the Sith, and even Padme on a balcony up there in Clone Wars. That image.
There's a lot of balcony imagery, and that's, for some reason, when I think of it, I mean, I think there is obviously the practical. They have a window to the atmosphere. They're looking.
Yeah.
But there is something just very powerful about that balcony image. It's one of the most powerful images of Bail, of being on that balcony in Attack of the Clones with the little fist bump of frustration on the balcony.
Yeah.
And I think that just that image of Leia's parents,
Yeah.
some of the original rebels holding each other on that balcony and clinging to hope, not even clinging to it, finding hope in the truly the darkest moment is real great, strong Star Wars storytelling.
Yeah, powerful indeed. And it works on a parental level, works on a rebel level. It works on, partners, husband and wife, in this case, holding each other for one final time. That strikes a chord too. It checks a lot of sad boxes, but also hopeful boxes. So that's why I love it so much.
Yeah. And I think we always like Brea content. Star Wars is a story about families, and Brea is a figure who's very important that I think we want to spend more time with. And this is a great story that really gives her day in in hope and terror.
Yeah, it does. It does. So that is my number 4, which means we now, if I'm counting correctly, are up to your number 3.
Yeah, my number 3 is pinging back to the brutal. And I think I picked this one because it's visually affecting, and it's also just such an incredibly decisive moment. And that is the death of Mace Windu. I know many people don't want this to be the death of Mace Windu. They want him to return. I always say, for myself, I would love more Mace Windu storytelling, but I kind of want this moment to be his death because it is so pivotal, so important. I think I was thinking through all the different kinds of death. We have the brutal of Owen and Beru. We have the very peaceful of Yoda. Even within the brutal versus the peaceful, we have the villains winning sometimes in death and the heroes winning sometimes in death. And this is one of those brutal deaths where the villains really win, totally unambiguously
clearly
win. I like how decisive it is, just in terms of the actual death, the actual vision of it, right? It is just so brutal. Arm chopped off in a moment of horrible betrayal from Mace's perspective, certainly. Then just bombarded with Sith lightning, which, often the lightning you can kind of feel a couple different ways about it. There are kind of some moments where it can almost be like oh yeah, that's one of your talents if you're a Sith on a video game and you drop down box, right? It's evil wizard stuff. There's other times where it's so effectively like, that's just pure hatred. That's the emotion of hatred pouring out of one person and invading someone else's body. And this one for me is just like, that is every ounce of hate that Sidious has just poured into Mace Windu's body and wrapping around his skeleton. That's every meeting that Sidious sat through where he had to pretend he didn't hate Mace Windu with every fiber of his being. And now it's just coursing through Mace Windu. It's not just lightning in that sort of like, wow, he took a lot of points of damage in D&D. He certainly did, but I also just feel it as the utter hate. And then, in classic Star Wars tradition, that's not enough. Arm chopped off, bombarded with lightning, thrown from an extremely high place.
Yeah.
It is, to me, like, yeah, sure. It's within the pulp world of Star Wars. Could he have survived? Sure.
Yeah. But
emotionally, I don't want him to survive because this is the literal and metaphorical, but very literal moment that the Jedi fell, right?
Yeah.
Sidious hasn't said execute Order 66 yet, but in some ways, this is the first Order 66 death.
Yeah.
Even Anakin recognizes this as the moment, the choice that he thinks he can't step back from.
Mm-hmm.
He has that moment of doubt, falls to his knees. What have I done? Sidious goes in for the kill of like, if the Jedi find out what you did here, this is the moment that you can't turn back from. So it's Mace's death. It's the tragedy for me that, and I know other people have different headcanon about it, and I think that's awesome. I think he actually did have Sidious on his heels.
Yeah.
And if Anakin had not intervened, Mace could have stopped the threat. To me, I enjoy that tragedy that Mace was so close to stopping these years of horror from happening. And instead it has utter horror happen to him. And then for my headcanon too, and this is total headcanon, just having fun with the ambiguities of the story, I really like the idea that the prophecy is that Anakin would end the Sith, and there are different moments and times he could have done it. He defeated Dooku. He could have helped stop Sidious in this moment.
Right.
He didn't. And then years and years later, he fulfilled the prophecy in Return of the Jedi. But this was the moment where Anakin truly could have made a different choice. And boy, does he not, and Mace Windu pays the price.
And Palpatine, flash forward to Return of the Jedi, his own lightning and falling a great deal. Yes, Star Wars traditions indeed. So much in this moment. I'm really glad you chose this one, because in terms of just Mace, Mace along the way, we know, he's maybe made some mistakes, maybe held a little too hard to the old Jedi Order lines. But I've always said too that he's also the one that along the way seems to be really right about a lot of things, and no one listens. We can just talk about bedside manner or execution of your ideas there with Mace. I don't know, but he pays the ultimate price. And I'm with you too. I think you could really get into, it is almost like a Mortal Kombat video game power chart on whether Palpatine let him win or how much he let him win and how much he was hoping Anakin would show up at the right time, all those kind of things. I think you could have that fun discussion, but it works best for me when there's a little bit of Mace did have the advantage. That Palpatine was a guy that had his plans, but needed to adjust and take advantage of things as they happened. And there's a lot of examples along the way. So I think it's all that in this moment, but it works bigger. It's just a bigger moment. If there's more at stake, if Mace actually, like you said, was right there on the cusp of really ending this, and Anakin stops that, that's more powerful to me, you know?
Yeah. And I think the other thing that makes it powerful for me is Sidious is benefited most when he convinces the Jedi to tie themselves into knots and take half measures.
Right.
We'll kind of fight the Clone Wars, but we really can't, go all the way in. So we're going to drag this out. We go to all of our wonderful, well-meaning Jedi characters who take themselves into exile and question, am I doing more harm than good? And that's what's really different about Mace is always a character who is determined to take a full measure.
Right.
He's like, I've analyzed this myself, and this is the right thing to do. In his speech here, it's understandable that Anakin is twisted around by it because he has been manipulated so successfully by Palpatine of claiming that the Jedi and the Sith are the same. And Mace unwittingly seems to demonstrate that by using the exact same words as Palpatine. It's a great manipulation. But I think from Mace's perspective, he's like, look, I've thought this through. The Jedi is not the Republic. We are our own agency. Our main thing, above all else, is to stop the dark side from rising. The courts won't convict him. This has to be done.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it with any malice in my heart. I have to stop him because he will do horrors to the galaxy. And I think all of that to me is more powerful if Palpatine is relying on Jedi hemming and hawing, and Mace is a problem for him because Mace doesn't hem and haw.
Yeah.
Mace is like, I got a list at home for myself, and stop the Sith is number one. That's my Jedi responsibility, and I'm not going to be distracted from.
Cut to Mace's Jedi apartment where he's just got a list he's writing. Stop the Sith every day. To-do list today.
Number two, stop the Sith again. Like he's not a half measure guy, and I think that is more difficult for Sidious to manipulate.
Yeah, and that's a great observation about Mace, and maybe some more conversations about Mace to come here on ForceCenter. But even going to Django, that is not a half measure.
Nope.
He's all in. So I like that about Mace, but also it's part of maybe the complications of Mace at times. I really do love his character. So the death means a lot. This is a powerful death, and he goes out in a big way. I'm with you. I want this to be the death. I do want more Mace storytelling, maybe going back in time. And as far as the Palpatine moment, it's the unlimited power moment. It's all of it. This is a big scene, and it's definitely a big death in Star Wars.
Yeah. Absolutely. The first, murder that Vader and Sidious do together, too. So,
Oh, you guys. Also, you highlighted, you've talked about it before, too, when it comes to Palpatine and Yoda. But one of the undervalued, less, dare I say, celebrated traits of Palpatine is just his pettiness. It's just like, I've had to sit with Mace. Oh God, I want to get him. And oh, here's my green friend. He's pretty bad.
no. It's so petty.
Just been waiting. That is a great number 3 from you, sir. And now we're going to go to an animated death here. And this is my number 3 is the death of Kanan Jairus from the episode Jedi Knight Rebels season 4. A lot to be said about this death, and I watched this whole episode this morning. I hadn't seen it, gosh, actually in a couple of years. It's still affecting. It's still big, and here's one of the reasons I included on this list, Joseph, is remember Rebels debuts in 2014. Remember Clone Wars debuts in 2008, and there's a lot of times where we as Star Wars fans go, oh, well, these characters have to die because X, Y, and Z can't be here during the story. And more often than not, the characters don't die.
No.
The Star Wars are floaty. He finds a way to keep them going in some way that are wonderful and creative, and we celebrate those. But this is one of those deaths that we're like, oh, I bet he's got to die. 4 years later, he does die. And it is surprising in its own way. It is painful. It is bittersweet. It is inspiring. It is everything. And it is, dare I say that word we like to throw around, cinematic. And this just, and I've got some Star Wars friends who are like, hey, I love Star Wars. I don't really connect to the animated stuff, which, by the way, I'm not a huge Pixar fan. I get it. Sometimes I just don't connect as much. It's not saying those movies are bad. It's just, hey, they don't grab me. So to some of those friends, I'm always like, I totally get it if maybe you're not pulled in by Rebels, Clone Wars, Resistance. I get it. But this is one of those moments I wish you were. I just wish you were, because it's a big, giant Star Wars moment with the music. This is some of Kiner's best music, including a part of the score syncing up with what would be Hera's scream of pain. And it's the music that you hear, not Hera. And there's a lot of Hera in this episode. Kanan's going to rescue her. So it's about their love. It's about this family they're leading. And there's a line that breaks my heart not a minute or two before this death. And it's Hera saying, after she's been rescued by Kanan, I'm not letting you go this time. And as we learned with Yoda, as we learned with the death of Ben Kenobi, Brea and Bail, and Owen and Beru, up to this point in our conversation, even Mace, sometimes life is going to have to ask you. It just asks you. You need to let go. You got to be ready to let go. Are you ready to let go? And this is a little bit about that for me. And that's why this works. And this whole sequence is preceded by an epic Star Wars kiss. We're talking romantic, big, sweeping 1950s end of an action movie, Die Hard, whatever you want to say. It's a wonderful moment of just expressed love and connection and dedication and their story so far. And Harry even makes reference to, your hair's short. It hasn't been this short since when I first met you, which is the events of the Book of New Dawn. And then the death happens. Orinda Price has the fuel tanks explode, and Kanan doesn't hesitate. He doesn't do anything other than what he needs to do, which is to stop the explosion, stop the flames, push Hera back, tell Ezra to go. Sabine, with tears in her eyes, flies the ship away because she knows it's the right thing. It is all those things. It is such a big moment. And I remember, because there's so many just dedicated Rebels fans. And even when they kind of knew this was coming, it still got us. And that's okay. It was okay to cry in Star Wars. It's okay to feel this big moment. And Ezra gets to, continue with Kanan in their own way. A lot of mystical stuff going on with that character. But this is a big moment, giant moment. Shout out to everyone who made it happen, especially Kevin Kiner. It's one of his big moments in terms of music. So that's my number 3, the death of Kanan Jarrus.
Yeah, I mean, what a great journey you've portrayed, just in terms of fan perception, fan relationship, right? To see a character like Kanan go, cool, fun, like him, gotta die.
Yeah.
Moving chits around on the board. He can't, and I definitely felt that way because he is, an older, engaged, mature Jedi. Ezra's got his own story. But to go from that sort of like, okay, he's a chess piece that shouldn't be on the board to how connected you are to him and how emotional it is, and how important it is to Kanan's journey, the way he leaves the board, right?
Right.
A couple things that I've always liked about that moment is, I think, one, it's just a great image. It's just an image of finding peace within chaos and death and horror. It's such there's so much about this death that is a triumph for the character of Kanan, that it's just this image of fire and inevitable death, right? And just that's the power of a Jedi, to reach out their hand and say, hold on just a second.
Yeah.
And the hand extended one way, holding back, the horror and the chaos and the darkness, and the other hand, reaching out to make sure that others are safe, is just kind of a great image of what a Jedi can do. And I think just for like the journey of Kanan, who dealt with so much trauma, that for better or worse, we for different fans, we got to see in the Bad Batch. But in the story of Rebels, his doubt at his training was never completed. He's not that great of a Jedi. He can't possibly train. This is a moment where he has true power, and he uses it, and it reminds you like that it does matter that that Jedi have this power, this responsibility, because it allows them to save people on a very literal level. But it almost more emotional to me. It's such a Jedi choice that we aren't all fighting this grand cosmic battle. This is an important moment, but it's an important moment to this part of the battle, to these people right here, and saving anyone is a good way for a Jedi to go. And I think the fact that it is just a moment where he is saving people that he cares about, to live another day, and letting go, and he's so at peace that is the Jedi way, and he is a Jedi.
Yeah. And his eyes clear up. He's been blind for a couple seasons, and his eyes clear up at the end. Means a lot. The clarity of what he's doing, the clarity that he now has in this final moment, his whole life leading to this, including, you're right, we do, no small feat that we see some of his trauma with Death of Val and everything now at the beginning of the Bad Batch or the comic series as well, which is equally as powerful in its own way now. It works for me. It works for the character. And also a lesson of even if you do know a character is going to die or has died, there's still value in the journey to that point. There's still value in the storytelling of their adventure and their lessons and their failures and their final successes. So that's why it moves me.
Yeah. The how and the why all matter.
It absolutely does. So that's my number 3, which means we're up to your number 2.
My number 2 is another violent, brutal death, but strangely, I wanted to include one death that I describe as a cheering death. Is in the audience literally cheers, because like we're talking about, there's some brutal deaths that are victories for the villains and some that are victories for the heroes. This is one that is a victory for the heroes in the moment, and that is the death of Supreme Leader Snoke. There's a lot. I almost went through and picked just some, and I got 1 or 2 in the runner-ups of like the Star Wars is an action series with heroes, and there's some awesome, you took out the bad guy, cool moments. I think this is kind of, to me, like the biggest and most pivotal. Awesome, you got the bad guy, and in a cool, surprising way. I think we've talked a lot about this scene and the complexity of what's going on with Kylo in this moment and Rey this moment, and they're both coming together, but also not understanding that they are not quite on the same page yet, but both thinking that they are in this moment. That the Rey catching the saber and them standing up together to face the Praetorian Guards, all that stuff is great. But to just focus on the Snoke of it for a moment, on the actual death, right? All throughout Star Wars, I think that it paints the villains as true threats. They have true power. They are to be feared, but they're also to be pitied because they're kind of, empty and pompous. And that was one of the things that I really connected to in early viewings of Last Jedi is the First Order is just walking all over our heroes. They've got the military might. Our heroes are backed into a corner. And still, everything that Snoke is doing in this film is just but what if Luke Skywalker comes back and kicks my ass? Everything is fear, fear, fear.
Yeah.
And to see this person who is clearly powerful, Snoke, and motivated by fear, but has this deadly power and happily takes life and revels in taking life, and then just gets really amped up throughout this movie, but in particular this scene of being just absolutely overconfident and full of himself. And the kind of scene we often see where a villain is just like, it is an insult that you didn't think that I would not have already thought of that, right? Yeah. It's like even a cliche villain line. He doesn't literally say that, but that's to me the spirit of his speech of like, how insulting to think that you could even think about standing up to me. And there is, to me, just an endless joy in that instant hubris karma of he's in the middle of, you could not possibly ever, what? That I think is what makes that moment, even after the surprise of it the first time, continue to be a fascinating, cheering death, because it really is. It's unique to that character. It's unique to that moment. But it's also just like, it's cathartic because you want that to happen to every pompous villain, to just, they're ranting about how great they are, and then they're suddenly cut in half, almost by their own hubris.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you chose this one, because I don't have the words to describe how much I actually do love this entire sequence. And again, you're talking about the Snoke throne room battle, which is its own kind of little story. And this is such a great moment for Rey with the blade coming to her hand. I mean, that is one of those moments I'll say years from now, I was there when you all cheered for that.
Because every screening I saw, there massive cheers for this moment.
Yeah, and what it means for Kylo. I mean, it's a Kylo moment versus a Ben moment for me, and him becoming who he kind of feels he should be, right? And a lot of stuff there, but just the pure, you did see it coming once the blades turned in. You did, and it was like you're right. This wasn't a last second save. This wasn't the villain gets an upper hand and the battle's in the third act of the movie. This is early on. I mean, midpoint or whatever it is on the actual screenplay, but. So I just remember thinking they're going to do, and then the blade goes through, and my mouth dropped in a way that I can't quite explain, because it wasn't like you do it. It's happening. You see it happening. You look into Kylo Ben's eyes. You know what he's like. And I remember having I'll just say it. I had a debate with my editors on my book, because I wrote about the scene, and they're like, we don't like this one because it wasn't a surprise to us. I was like, that it was in the overall sense, but it wasn't about that. It was about what actually happened, which is what you're describing, Joseph.
Well, and I think I think depending on different viewers, it is a surprise, because yes, we see what Kylo is attempting to do, but we feel like, I think many people in the first viewing feel like, but it's not going to work.
Right. Yeah, well, again, this is what this whole movie is about, and not the whole movie, but going back to what we were talking about, Page Jakku, you're right. It's going to subvert things to validate things. That's we need a Star Wars bumper sticker for that. So yes. Anyways, sorry.
Yeah, and it is just. I do not mean this as a pun. It's just the sentence I was going to say, but I'll acknowledge it. It's executed so well. The execution is executed well, of just that utter shock on his face, and then the pullback. And it's got great rhythms with Luke and Palpatine's back and forth about, your faith, your overconfidence is your weakness, your faith in your friends is yours. It's like, that is, evil doesn't change too much, and it is always overconfident, and it can be exploited, and that overconfidence can be exploited, and this is a great moment of that.
A great pairing with it is the cut back to the throne room after, when it's just his sliced dissected body and his tongue's out, and it's comedy, but it also reinforces everything you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. That power isn't everything. You know, obviously Kylo does use his power, but he uses his knowledge and frankly being clever. You know, this is a moment where he is the son of Solo and Leia and the student of Luke, right? Of like, I've got a clever solution to the fact that he can overpower me and the fact that he can read my mind.
Yeah, indeed. Well,
yeah,
that gold robe, all the hubris, our favorite Star Wars word, came crashing down in one flick of a blade.
It did indeed, and I still cheer alone in my home when I watch.
Oh yeah, that's a chill moment. Come on, that hand goes up. Yeah, Star Wars. It's pretty darn good. That's your number 2. We're up to my number 2. Then we'll take a break, have some runner-ups, and get to our number 1 favorite Star Wars deaths here. My number 2. We're going to 2016's Rogue One. And, well, there's a lot of choices in that film. Speaking of, well, they all got to die, that was definitely a story when the lights come up, you're thinking, they all got to die. And, well, they do, which was, in its own way, surprising. Which is, I won't say that's why a lot of people love Rogue One, but there's just the story has stakes, and the story is darker, dimmer at times for Star Wars stories, but all the deaths point towards one thing, and to me, that one thing is hope. All those kind of things there. So, what I'm listing for my number 2 death here is the death of Cassie and Andor and Jyn Erso. So, some thought process into it. I love, which is a weird thing to say, but the death of K2SO affects me. That's the one that you're kind of like, oh, are they going to do this? I mean, they're starting with a droid, so it's going, maybe that's a little easy for us to take. And it's a powerful moment. Choice over programming is the big theme, and to me, in K2's life and sacrifice. I love that death for what it means. The death of Bodhi Rook is actually also, I got to say, one of my favorite Star Wars deaths. It is an everyday man making good and ultimate sacrifice. And Riz Ahmed's face just tells the story. The Baze Malbus and Shared Emway deaths are powerful in their own way. So I could have listed any one of those, or could have just said, hey, all of them. But I'm going with this one because, Joseph, this is another thing where the music takes over. That's that piece of music, Your Father Would Be Proud, is absolutely one of my favorite Star Wars pieces. The battle is therefore in the background. And the focus is the death here of these two characters, of their journeys, both the separate paths to get here, not just at odds in this movie, but the lives they've led so far that we pick up from for the movie and know a little bit more, and we'll know more about it with the Andor series. And I predict that Andor series is going to make this moment even more powerful.
Oh yes,
I love their connection. I've never taken it as romantic when they're staring at each other, but I also think there's a little connection there. There is a love there in a way, because they know they're about to spend the last moments with each other, and they just went through this, and they both look at each other's eyes and know what's about to happen. That's powerful for me. Then the hit on the beach, which I remember even at the time, it's like, oh, this is kind of the Deep Impact death. If you remember that movie with Taya Leone and her father, and there's you can say it draws upon other things that have come before. But it stands on its own. The death of Krennic wrapped in this too, dying at the hands of his own aspirations and his creation that he held onto so tightly. And what this is about, you got Vader. He's about to do his hallway scene, but he's in the background behind the music. You got Radis, Rogue One, May the Force be with you. Such a sad moment. He's about to die. But all this, to me, Joseph says, this with the music taking control and them holding on to each other and the tears in Jin's eyes, death is in the distance. It's hope that's going to take us forward. It is literally the movie saying we must go towards hope. This is about hope. The sacrifice is about hope. This battle is about hope. That word gets tossed around so much. Cassian, the first to really say it in this movie, but it is about hope. And that emerges from absolute darkness, the unnatural eclipse of the Death Star. So that's why I'm submitting this as my number 2 choice.
Yeah, no, I think it's really great that we talk Rogue One. I think it is something that I think doesn't get discussed enough when sometimes people who are a little bit more critical of Star Wars saying, oh, they don't take any risks. You know, I always think that those walls of action figures of characters who sadly and brutally died
Yeah.
is a big risk. But I think it really, really works because hope is a word that gets used in Star Wars a lot. It is an idea that gets used in Star Wars a lot. But going all the way back to the deaths of Owen and Beru, the darkness, the true possibility of horror is what gives the light so much power and makes it feel not just like, a little greeting card message, but something that truly has weight and meaning and power. And for me, what's so moving about the deaths in Rogue One isn't the canon thing of like, okay, well then why wasn't Cassian at this meeting, or where was he in the background of Hoth? It wasn't that. To me, it was really, they went there knowing they had a high likelihood of not making it out, but it was worth it to have even a glimmer of hope of not living under the tyranny of the Empire forever, and not having the galaxy live under the tyranny forever. That is what was worth it to them. And I remember my first viewing of K2SO's eyes go out, and it is very sad. And there's the like, is that what they're going to do? Are they going to, offer the droid as a sacrifice?
Right. Yeah.
And then when Bodhi Rook goes, then you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
For me, it was, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And even with that, I felt such joy for Cassian and Jin's victory.
Yeah.
And such humanity in the way that they looked at each other with hope and with connection and with true affection. Doesn't even matter what it is, It doesn't matter of what would they have dated. It's just you can feel the true, honest connection between them. And even is the what the film was telling me was inevitable is coming. I still had that little bit of like, but maybe there's a cave underneath them. Check it out, guys. Like, and that to me, whenever a movie has that sort of that classic tragedy storytelling of, we know it's going to happen, but we still kind of hope maybe it'll be different somehow on this viewing.
Yeah.
The death has that real impact. And I feel the tragedy of it, but I also feel the great meaning of it and the peace that they have come to, that they are in that moment of hope of like, we are sure somebody was listening. We're sure somebody got it. We're sure it was worth it, And then I think also just in terms of just imagery, we have lots of different images of death, from the very shocking and brutal and fire and water. And this one, I just think the imagery of water, they're killed by the Death Star technically, but it's the wave of water, right?
Yeah.
And water in human storytelling, and I think human philosophy has such power of, that idea that we're waves, but then we emerge and join the sea, and we're always there, but we're not there in the same way we were before. The fact that it's a wave gives it this sense of, even though it is a horrific death and a violent death, it still gives it a slight sense of peace and nature.
Yeah. And nature versus mechanical, organic versus mechanical in Star Wars is, it's a theme. I know it's close to your heart and important to us here at ForceCenter. There's something to that. And you said something there too, but peace, that piece of music, I've talked about it before, but just to highlight it here, it's like I was one of those. I didn't like the Rogue One score the first time I saw it. I don't know about that. I go on shows, pounding a desk. Yeah, I don't think music worked. And then I thought it was one day just this piece of music came on, and I was like, wait, what is this? Because this is moving me. This is Star Wars, right? And just went over to my iPod and was like, or my phone, and was like, oh God, that's right. This is the scene of Rogue One, and it got me. And now this is just absolutely wonderful piece of music by Michael Giacchino, and there's a great piece in it. It's sadness. It's very sad and somber, especially with the imagery and the image of Vader just kind of looking out, and just, it's another day at the office for Vader almost. I mean, I would argue it is, and it's another day full of rage for Vader. But there's peace in it. There's hope in this song and this piece of music, and that's why it works for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think there is great great bittersweet piece in it. I think this is a great choice.
Yeah. So there we go. From that's my number 2, which means we are going to take a quick break and come back and go into some runner-ups and then talk about our favorite deaths in Star Wars. Grab some Kleenex, some tissue. It might get sad. All right, stick around here on ForceCenter. Hey, ForceCenter friends, make sure you're keeping up to date on all the great content from Jennifer Landa. Whether it's YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok, you whippersnappers, ForceCenter's own Jennifer Landa continues to bring you fun, informative, and insightful laughs and moments.
Also, Jennifer brings her experience and perspective as a Star Wars-loving mother to her DIY projects, blogs, and more, so be sure to head on over to jennylanda.com, that's JENILANDA.com, for articles like how to make your own Darth Maul sneakers or 10 unique Star Wars baby gift ideas.
Follow Jen on Twitter and Instagram at Jennifer Landa and on TikTok as Jennifer Landa 1138. Welcome back to Star Wars Ranked. Yes, we are having a lot of fun talking about sadness, but also hope and beauty and peace and purpose in Star Wars and a little bit of hubris fallen. It's our journey through our favorite Star Wars deaths. I'm Ken Knapsack along with Joseph Scrimshaw. Thank you all for listening today. Joseph, before we get to our number 1 choices, we always like to go through some runner-ups. So what are the deaths that moved you just enough to not get on the top 5?
Yeah, this was a hard one because there are some like major deaths that felt like we should acknowledge, and then there's some just ones that are fun is a weird word, but a different kind of death.
Yeah.
One of the more run-of-the-mill deaths, sorry, that's weird, but I'm acknowledging it, that I thought was important to reference is in A New Hope, when Luke and Leia are trying to get across the chasm in the Death Star, and Luke manages to shoot one of the stormtroopers, and the stormtrooper falls and screams. It is, of course, the Wilhelm scream, which goes on to have great importance in Star Wars. But it's also just one of the first stormtrooper falls from a high place. And I just obsessed with how much that is a huge part of action-adventure storytelling is you gotta fall from a high place. So between the falling from the high place and the Wilhelm scream, that was just sort of a rank and file action adventure death that I wanted to highlight.
I think starting the grand tradition, many grand traditions in Star Wars, and a damn good shot from Leia.
Yeah. Technically, it is Luke. I had looked it up. Leia, the one that Leia shoots just sort of face plants like he's going to take a nap.
That's right. Yes, right.
The one Luke shoots falls all the way down and gives us the beautiful scream.
There you go.
Yeah. Another one for me that is in the almost like the cheering because the hero won and just sort of absolute action adventure, totally over the top. I felt I needed to acknowledge it, over the top in a good way, and that is the death of General Grievous. Look, when your organ sac blows up and flames shoot out in your entire body and an action figure is made of exactly that moment, that's a death that needs to be celebrated.
It's I mean, keep it with Attack of the Clones. It is 1950s sci-fi. It's great in its own way.
It is the bad guy underestimated the hero and paid the price in flames, for sure. So those were 2 of my lighter ones. Do you want me to pin back to you?
Yeah, let's do. Also, the Grievous one. I mean, what better way to just really, drive home Kenobi's point about blasters and being uncivilized.
It is really uncivilized, right? The explosion of his very combustible organ sac.
Some on my list here. I got to go one that I count up there with the death of Optimus Prime in the Transformers movie, 1986. That one that really affects childhoods if you grew up in the 80s, or again, anytime you see them for the first time. And that is the death of Nanta, the Ewok, in Return of the Jedi. The poor Ewoks fighting the good fight, and ATST takes a few of them out, and we get to see it with Nanta. And just, I mean, you would talk about, I got Yoda dying. I'm 7 years old. I got Yoda dying. I got, I'm a dog person, so I have dogs at home. I had a poodle at the time, Inky, the poodle. You could argue it looked like a little Ewok. And you got just the whale, the death, the buddy Ewok kind of pushed him and then fall. Oh my God. They talk about just, I left the theater like, I don't know if I can, I signed up for lightsabers, not this like tears at 7. Like, what are you doing to me? So got to include Nanta.
It is the Nanta shake. It is the, you're okay, right? Let's
go. Yeah.
Let's walk it off. Yeah. That one did stick with me. That was hard.
Yeah, it's hard indeed. The other one, this is, I know I've talked about it before, but it's also about the journey and how I got there. It's the death of Mr. Bones, the converted battle droid belonging to Tem Snap Wexley, featured in the Aftermath series. As positive as I am about Star Wars, and always have been, in the sense of we just love to celebrate what we love in Star Wars. There's things to criticize, there's things to question, there's things to just not connect with it. That's part of our journey as fans. But always, it's Star Wars, and I love it, so I want to love it. When the first Aftermath book came out, I just did not love Mr. Bones at all. And I would sit in my friend Jack's office at the old Defy Media offices. He was the director of development there. And every morning we'd just sit down and have a Star Wars conversation. And Mr. Bones would come up a lot. We both didn't like Mr. Bones. And over time, all right, he's growing on me. He's growing on me. And cut to his death in Aftermath Empire's End. Which was by friendly fire, by the way, and the Battle of Jakku. I'm just, a lot of people, I'm just obsessed with that battle. And the more we learn about it, the more I just would love, give me a documentary movie about the Battle of Jakku. His death and Tem and this kid who's in this war and his trusty battle droid, dying in his arms, essentially. I couldn't believe I was affected by it. And it was a lesson in just let the story happen and let your heart open to the things that you might not like in Star Wars, because I went from Mr. Bones was a punchline to I had tears in my eyes reading it the first time. So here's to you, Mr. Bones.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great lesson in, Mr. Bones has some elements of, particularly in that first book, it's been a while since I read it, where he feels like a one-note joke of like, we get it. Like the B1 battle droid who's not that scary is now super violent. But then as we spend more time with him and get to know the character more and know the character's connection to Snap and in their connection back and forth, then it takes on this weight. I'm really glad you brought that one up.
Well, good. Sorry, I was coughing. I pressed mute. I was crying because of Mr. Bones. Yeah, no, and shout out to Wendig for that one, for making that, for committing to because especially at the time too, we're launching this new era, and the prequels are still being talked about as this thing, they need to make good for it, right? Not saying we were, but that was still out there. You'd have those conversations. That even Laura Santeca's line of "this will begin to make things right" was a shot at the prequels. I remember hearing those conversations and having those conversations in break rooms in 2015. Yeah, so to have Wendig just be like, yeah, it's a battle droid from the prequel era, and I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, and it really does grow into Mr. Bones feels unstoppable, right? And I think that also gives the death weight. And I'm with you. At first, I was like, I'm not sure about this, and I came around to loving Mr. Bones.
Yeah. One more for me. I'll kick it back to you, then back to me to close it out here. I got IG-11, man, from Mandalorian season 1, episode 8, chapter 8. It's a great episode. Taika Waititi did a great job with that episode, and this is a great death. Talk about going from a droid that begins his journey with us by trying to kill the target, the asset, Grogu, to protecting him, being a nurse droid, but also giving up his existence for him in a wonderful, just Star Wars way. It worked, and I wanted to pay respects to IG-11 for what he did there. So I love that one.
That is an absolutely great one. That sacrifice really completes the journey of IG-11 and is really great.
Yeah. What else is on yours, sir?
Yeah, so a couple of the bigger ones for me that I wanted to shout out shortly is Satine's passing in the Clone Wars. Yeah. Satine is such a great character. It is such a unflinching, horrific moment. It really showing Satine's resolve but also Maul's just the sickness of the dark side, and such a powerful Kenobi moment that of course he's utterly devastated, but not going to fall to the dark side because of it. So there's a lot going on in Satine's death, and just that character that I wanted to shout out.
Right.
The other two for me were ones that I had a really hard time not putting in my list. So I'll keep it short, and we can revisit these more in the future. One is Rey and Ben, and part of the reason that is like I wanted to bring that up because this is such a unique death in Star Wars. Rey dies, right?
Yeah.
Finn feels it. The performance by Daisy Ridley is very convincing, and the fact that is an actual death, that she pushed herself, she made this sacrifice to save the galaxy from Palpatine, Sidious, and then this whole cycle of storytelling of Rey and Ben being a dyad and being willing to share their life energy back and forth. And I know the passing of Ben Solo, there are many very strong opinions about. I respect that. I think there are different ways the story could have gone, but for me, that moment really works in that he has come back to himself. He has come back to wanting to be selfless, wanting Rey to live on, and the great rhythm that has with Anakin, so desperate to save people he loves, but seeing it only from the perspective of I, Anakin, can't bear to lose this person, and to see Ben accomplish something in the opposite of like, I have this to give so that this person that I love can continue. I think there's a lot of power in that.
Connective threads and themes in that movie to other movies, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the final one for me is Anakin Skywalker himself. Boy, as you and I are reviewing Return of the Jedi, a lot of people say that's the fun one. That's the one where the heroes win and you just eat the popcorn and cheer while also watching so many people die. But it's true. It's the magic of Star Wars. That movie chock full of death was fun. And it is. But for me, Anakin, what I really wanted to highlight is there is such surprise and peace in his moment of actually passing, of really connecting to Luke, that saying that, I'm going to save you. You already have. But the fact that his last words, this is what I really wanted to highlight. His last words are, "Tell your sister you were right."
Yeah.
It is Anakin truly wanting to make this very small connection that he's able to his daughter, that at the very least give her the knowledge that I made the right choice in the end. And in a way, it's such powerful last words because that's what he wants to continue to live on.
Right.
It's not thank you for forgiving me, not that Luke explicitly does, but it is so there's a selflessness about it. There's a selflessness to Anakin's act of grabbing and destroying Sidious, because the lightning does bring him to his end. But there's also a selflessness in those being his final words, as he's literally just not thinking about himself. He's thinking about how have my actions affected other people? How are they going to ring out? Your sister needs to know what you know, that at least at the end, I made the right choice. And for me, it's just a great sort of, it's a beautiful final moment. And it's a little bit of an ellipsis to what eventually gets dealt with in the sequel trilogy of the shadow of Vader lives on. And that's what Anakin's got on his mind at the very end is please tell your sister there was more to me than just the horror. And in terms of music, you've done such a great job reminding us of how powerful music is. I love that sad Imperial March on the, I think it's a guitar, but just that whatever stringed instrument, just that sad small Imperial March to go with it is beautiful.
Yeah. And everyone knows I love that darn Return of the Jedi novel. Read the book version too. It's the tears of Luke on his father's face that he for a moment feels like rain to him. It's such a beautiful moment. So definitely check both. Just read it while you're watching the movie. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. A couple final ones for me here. I want to touch upon the Death of Val. Now, the Death of Val has its own conversation around it that's tremendously valuable. We acknowledge that here. We've talked about that here. Could it happen later? Should it have happened at all? Wonderful discussions to have. But I got to say, just the death itself is one of my favorites because it is there's a lesson for Han in there, and that's part of the issue of these characters serving Han's story. We've talked about that before, but also for Beckett and the life he's chosen. There's a lot about it there, but also it's just one of the more badass deaths in Star Wars. And I want to give Val some points for that too. If you gotta go. And I just always admired Val in that moment in a weird way too. It's been a fun ride, babe. Boom, we gotta go, we gotta do it. And it does speak to the loss. I mean, just it's almost a pointless loss. And what are you fighting for? What are the bigger things? And these are just these smugglers, scoundrels going around the galaxy. But for them, it was everything. For her, it was everything. And I've always, outside of the bigger conversations about that moment, I've just also liked the moment, you know?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought it up because I wrestle with that death and I have plenty of things to question. But in the spirit of celebrating that moment, I do like what you're saying of here is a woman who is very, very clear on her ethos of, this is the way the galaxy works. The job is a job, and the job is the most important thing. And I'm not changing my mind on that.
Yeah. So there's that one. And then the other one, speaking of sacrifice for even a greater cause, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the death of Amulen Holdo. The famous, infamous Holdo maneuver, a breathtaking moment, one of great power and purpose, one of sadness, one of just Leia saying that it's just been too many, but it still has to happen. And it just visually, the sound production, everything about it, sound design is just amazing. And I just love that death, man. And I will, pun intended, die on that hill. That is a great death. And that was needed to be and should have been and was Holdo's moment.
I know we still got more to talk about, but I think you're taking it full circle in a great, great way because there is that questioning at the beginning, even with Paige Tico's death of, when does a daring sacrifice, should you make these daring sacrifices like Poe is willing to make at the beginning? And I really love the bookend. This to me with Holdo is one of those moments where if it's subvert in order to validate, this is the validation of Holdo is the wise character who recognizes a moment that is worth sacrifice, and she takes it, and it is a powerful moment.
No, great. I stand by it. I love it. And talk about theater moments, man. Where were you when the entire audience went, or as I heard in every screening for the first 5 viewings, a curse word in the back. Heard it often. And then final one here. Sorry, we have a lot of honorable mentions because, hey, there's a lot of powerful deaths in Star Wars. And we want to mention the death of Han and Leia.
Yes,
their own. They're celebrated. They're important for the story. They're powerful. And these are two characters that I love. And I've gone from a point of not fully enjoying or appreciating the death of Han to now, especially after Episode 9. Just it's now a very important moment for me personally as a fan and for the story. And the Leia one has great, just it resonates as well. So we just wanted to make sure we were mentioning them.
Yes, absolutely. And they both really resonated with me. And I think for me, in some ways, it is the actions that they are taking in the moments of their death that are really, really resonant. But I'm glad that we acknowledged some pretty important passings in Star Wars.
Yeah. So there you go. That's mine. Any on the table for you, sir?
My last one is Rats Tyrell. Come on. Every once in a while, you there's those moments where it's a quick moment in an action adventure movie, but it resonates. I both feel for Rats Tyrell and his family, and am sort of amused by the horror of it.
It is truly one of the more tragic deaths in Star Wars. Rats, we miss you. Rats, we miss you. From there, we are going to go to our number one choices, our favorite deaths in Star Wars. This has been, dare I say, fun discussion about sad things in Star Wars, but we can find great hope and purpose in them as well. We'll go with my number one, so Joseph can close the show with his number one. I am going with, well, there's technically two choices, Joseph, and feel free to talk about both of them in this selection here, but I'm going with the death of Maul, as seen in the Twin Sons episode in Star Wars Rebels. We did do the scene-by-scene breakdown not too long ago, so I don't want to completely remix things we talked about there. But again, talk about just the show itself. When Rebels began, if you would have told me that this whole arc, this whole story with Maul was going to be in it, I don't know if I would have been on board with it. And then then we're going to go see Kenobi and Ezra. I don't know. There would have been a lot of, but, and then it happens and the story happens. And this is absolutely one of our favorite moments. It's one of our favorite episodes of the show. It's one of my favorite lightsaber fights. I know it has great power for you as well. So there's a lot to say about that moment, but the final image of Maul, the fatal blow delivered, the lessons of growth versus just holding on to your anger and your vengeance, and compassion and empathy versus vengeance. The stubbornness of Maul does not change who he is, and that's part of the reason Kenobi knows he can use the Qui-Gon method and defeat him so quickly. There's so much to the fight, but just the final moments. Maul dying in the arms of the man, the Jedi. He based his whole life, his second half of his life, on destroying the hate for him, fueling him. To die in his arms, a lesson of compassion, a lesson of empathy. You get the Chosen One conversation. And Kenobi, who I believe feels Luke is the Chosen One, gives that to Maul as kind of a last moment of peace. And yeah, even in his final moments, Maul's talking about he will avenge us. But that to me is a sad line that speaks to this entire life, that in which he wasn't given the choice. He was plucked and turned into this blunt weapon by Palpatine, and the Night Sister's mother tells him. And he carried, as we've learned in some supplemental material, carried this bitterness in his heart that why wasn't I good enough for the Jedi? Why didn't they find me when I was 2 or 3 and I was raised to be a Jedi? And maybe he spent nights, as headcanon for me, wondering what could have been, and how that fueled his anger as well. And now it's one of the reasons he wants to destroy these Jedi and have a revenge. All of that, a final moment of peace, as much as peace as Maul could experience. It's truly a beautiful, beautiful, poetic moment. It's sad, it's heavy, but it's also inspirational. It means a lot for Kenobi, and as a Kenobi fan, I know you love that moment too. So I'm going with that death of Maul's my number one most favorite death in Star Wars.
I'm so glad you picked this one. I'm glad it's your number one, because I just felt like this definitely has to be on the list. It has power from so many different perspectives, and you highlighted so many of them. For me, it has power from the perspective of Phantom Menace being his first death, sort of. From that perspective of it was an action-adventure death. It was a good guy defeating the bad guy cheering moment. It's a moment of Lucas embracing his philosophy of being open to change, of the quotes from back in the day of like, let's have him split in half so there's no ambiguity,
right
and then we move towards like, but actually there's more to be done with that character. Somehow Maul returned, so Maul returns and he grows into this character, and we get this great perspective of what it is to be tortured by the dark side, and we see that Maul is vicious, horrible killer, but we see these moments of charm and personality, and even within manipulating people, I always feel like he doesn't quite want to be alone,
right.
So it's this very human insight into the dark side, into the horror of it. It's in Satine's death scene where Kenobi tells him, like, I know this wasn't your choice, and that doesn't get through to Maul at all. And we've talked about that final death scene in Rebels. Like you said, we did that whole breakdown. So I don't want to, as you say, remix too much. I think the powerful thing about it as a death in Star Wars is it is a moment where from a very Jedi perspective, it's that moment of like, Kenobi doesn't want violence. He'll do anything to avoid violence. He can't. It's either he defeats Maul or Luke is put in great jeopardy, and who knows who else, but Luke in specific. And it is such a Jedi death of like, not only is there the contrast between Obi-Wan has evolved, Maul hasn't, and that is what allows Kenobi to easily defeat him.
Yeah.
But there is that sense of there is nothing from Kenobi of action, adventure, excitement. You need to be stopped. The thrill of battle. Kenobi's not thinking, finally, the monster who killed Qui-Gon and Satine. It's just what had to be done in the second that it's done. That Kenobi takes him in his arms, and then it's great picture of empathy, right? Empathy doesn't necessarily mean the person having empathy will agree with you and step out of your way and just let you do what you're going to do.
Right.
It means I will try to understand where you are coming from.
Right.
And it's this great moment of empathy where Kenobi is so peacefully like, I can't let you go after Luke, but I have empathy. I know this wasn't your choice. I know what you've been through. And I know, to me, Kenobi, vengeance is not something to be sought, but it's almost a twist on, Leia saying to Han, if money is all you value, then that's what you'll get, paraphrasing. And it's almost like Kenobi just kind of sadly saying, I know vengeance is the only thing you can value. So I will allow you, to find solace in vengeance in your final moments. It's empathy. It's understanding, this is the only solace I can offer this poor person. And it's a death that is just so not about violence. It's about empathy.
Yeah, beautiful stuff in there, sir. And the idea of like I said, it's a kind of piece for Maul, but it also speaks to just, man, it's really, when he says, he will avenge us, and we know the chosen one. That's the Jedi, or the person that's going to destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force, and for Maul to be like, yeah, that's going to happen, right? Because I need the Sith to be destroyed, even though you all met me as Darth Maul. That's been pain. That's been a prison. It's been an emotional prison for years. And then what you said too, Joseph, about there's something true about Maul, not wanting to be alone, right? And yet spends a lot of time alone, and which makes him worse in a way. But yeah, even forming groups or trying to get with Ezra as his apprentice, like he needs people around him in a way. And for Kenobi to literally grab him before he hits the ground, Maul probably deserves to die alone in a desert, with no one around, and just the creatures of Tatooine, devouring him, quite frankly, and he doesn't. He dies in someone's arms. He does not die alone. I think that's pretty powerful too. Again, for Kenobi, but just for the Star Wars story, and just for Maul himself. And then there's a funeral pyre is set for Maul that's been mentioned a few times for what Kenobi did after this. So that's another thing I love about it. That's why that image of him, Maul in his arms, just falls into his arms. Kenobi, he never hits the ground. It's powerful for me as well.
Absolutely powerful. I think that's such a great choice.
That is my number one, but we're not done, sir. Close our list out. Bring us home with your number one death in Star Wars.
Yeah, this is the number one was for me that ultimate battle between the intellectual of like, okay, well, what does it do for the story? What does it do for the themes? And then versus the emotional of what when you close your eyes just comes to your mind. And I think for me, for my journey with Star Wars, it has to be the peace and purpose of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. I think for me, it's the most powerful death because I don't ultimately feel it as a death. It is, to me, what's so powerful about the moment is it's a transition. It is taking Jedi deaths that we've seen before, from Yoda saying, this is the way of things, this is the Force, and accepting it, to Obi-Wan really making that peaceful choice in raising his blade. In the very first Star Wars film, even to Anakin saying, you've already saved me, to Kanan, accepting his fate. And it's really taking it to this next level that it isn't just a moment of acceptance. It's a moment of almost joy.
Yeah.
There's clearly, pain. He clearly knows it's coming. He struggles, up to this point of this pose of dignity and peace. And what really drives it home to me and makes it so powerful is just the phenomenal expression on Luke Skywalker's face. I really do think Mark Hamill should be given 800 Oscars even after the fact for The Last Jedi. I think his performance throughout is phenomenal. But that moment where he really straightens and he stares out to the horizon.
Yeah.
That moment connects not only to the famous moment of young Luke Skywalker looking to the horizon. It connects to that moment, and it connects to, this is a truth of who this person is. He tries to be a good Jedi and live in the moment, but as a person, he's always kind of looking to the horizon. He's always kind of looking at what's next and what's the next adventure. And the way he looks out always makes me feel like this is his the crude matter. This is the death of his body. Yeah. This is not the death of his soul. This is not the death of Luke Skywalker. This is Luke Skywalker looking off into the horizon at the next adventure. And that is always what makes it not just an acceptance, but it almost a joy of what's next. I've done what I've needed to do in this mortal plane, and now I'm on to be with the Force into the next adventure.
It's that's a beautiful way to describe it. Because the peace and purpose is a great, big thesis for this death, and you really feel that. I love that they just say it, right? Right? It's like it was peace and purpose. But even for Luke, because this is what it means, not just for the Jedi, but the light side, but just the big lesson in Star Wars, this attachment thing, all those kind of things we've been dealing with for 8 films at this point, and supplemental material, books and comics and standalone films. That attachment, there's no attachment here from Luke, and he truly is going on. And flash forward to Palpatine, Episode 9, just the opposite of that, just gripping everything he can get, not letting go. It's just it's light and dark there, and it's so clear. But just for Luke himself, you're right. Just like we used to stare off and wonder what's next, here he is again, knowing that something's coming and excited for it. That's powerful.
Yeah, and I think there's the power in what caused it is this allowing himself to be seen as a symbol of hope, validating everything that Leia and Rey have been fighting for and caring about, coming to peace with. It is important that the Jedi remain to defend the light when the darkness overreaches, and knowing that he has passed that message on to Rey, knowing that he's very literally saved the Resistance and saved his sister. He started this journey staring out at the horizon going, what's there for me? Saving this princess I don't know. He literally just did it.
Yeah.
And there's that great connection of staring out and wondering in A New Hope, what's out there for me? What am I meant for? I know it's more than this. To then end staring at the horizon at the first Jedi temple, way up there on the pinnacle of this peaceful island that symbolizes the light of you really found what was out there for you, Luke. There's a real success from what he wondered as he looked into that first sunset to what he accomplished as he's looking into that final sunset and ready to move on.
Yeah, and it's a great way to almost close the conversation, but I want to ask this, and this is something that I've always thought about this and discussed around this death of Luke, and to talk to you about it here now. Great time to really do it. This idea of just, when you see this film, I wasn't ready for this. I too wanted more adventures of Luke Skywalker as I knew him. I get that. And I didn't immediately come out of the film fist pumping going, well, it was great. I had to think about it. I had to come to terms with it. And I've always gone back to the reason that peace and purpose is so powerful to me is I kept thinking, okay, what would I rather have seen at any point? If he dies in 7, 8, 9, or episode 10, 11, 12, the death of Luke Skywalker, if I wanted to see that for a character that's so important to this franchise that I love, what would I want to see? And it's like, I could, dying, being cut in two by Kylo Ren or fighting the Knights of Ren and exploding an X-Wing. Like, I couldn't think of anything that had more just power than this moment. And that's where I eventually came to not just terms with this, but in accepting it, but just loving everything about this death. So I have to ask you, sir, what was your journey with the death of Luke Skywalker?
Yeah, my journey in watching it the first time is I had just, I felt like the movie gave me everything I needed. So I had been so happy with Luke's big action in the movie and big, powerful force use being something that was such a victory of pacifism, which to me connected with his victory in Return of the Jedi. So I was like kind of fist pumping in my soul over the projection to Crate. And then there's the roller coaster of like, oh, and the hand is coming up, and he's crawling back up on the rock. He survived. The next episode's going to be Luke and Rey's happy times, in that moment, and then the realization that no, it's coming. So I went on that roller coaster, but I think everything in the filmmaking that I described worked for me of seeing that look on Luke's face. I think the fact that the words peace and purpose were used, that there was communication to Rey and Leia, so you didn't have to worry about them. There's no ambiguity of that Luke is at peace with this choice. And I think something that I didn't even really recognize in my first viewing that worked very well on me is before you realize that Luke is a projection on Crate, the fear that his death would be violent. And then the fact that Luke even calls that out and saying, if you strike me down in anger, I'll be with you always. And just, he brings to mind like how much you don't want to see Kylo violently cut him in half, even if he's going to disappear like Obi-Wan, that I didn't want that violence. And when I rewatched the film, I realized, that moment of putting the idea, the image of a violent death for Luke in my mind really is this great contrast that he does not have a violent death. He has a death, a passing of peace and purpose. So I think after my first viewing, I definitely went on the roller coaster of he's going to survive, he's going to be in the next movie, and then to sadness, but also just like real acceptance and happiness for the character. I think this whole podcast we're talking about death, and I know everybody has a different relationship, a different experience with it, but for me it was that kind of death like in real life where somebody has lived a long and a happy life and they're surrounded by loved ones, and it is the sadness that death is a truth, but within that sadness the person died with peace and purpose, and what can any of us hope for ourselves or our loved ones but that? And I think I felt that on a real level of like my long journey with this character and all the different things that he's meant to me at different times of my life. I felt like, well, what else could I possibly want for this character?
Asked and wonderfully answered. The happiness for Luke Skywalker, the character. This is a fictional character we're talking about, but obviously has great power in the lives of so many people. It truly a symbol of hope, absolutely. But happiness for the character actually was something that I did take from not just what you said, but just from the moment of what else would you have wanted? Dying on a flaming X-Wing, crashing into a third Death Star, a fourth Death Star, 2 more Death Stars. What would you have wanted? Hey, there's a lot of options, and a lot of us have a different relationship to this, but I love what you're saying here. And it is a great number one choice, the death of Luke Skywalker, full of peace and purpose here. So, Joseph, thank you so much for not just bringing a nice list here, but sharing your personal connections to all these characters that have gone on in the Star Wars story.
Yeah, thank you for suggesting this episode and for doing this episode. Your list was great, and this was really, really fun and deep surprise to really examine what all of these different ideas of death and Star Wars mean to me.
And out there listening, I'm sure you all have your own list and your own connections to these deaths and others. Hey, you can always let us know by reaching out on Twitter. Use the hashtag Star Wars Ranked and follow us at Force Center Pod. We're on Instagram and YouTube as well. Facebook page is Force Center Podcast. You can get an audio book on us by going to audibletrial.com/Force Center. That's audibletrial.com/Force Center. Get some merch at tpublic.com/user/Force Center, and you can support us directly at patreon.com/Force Center. Podcast available a lot of different spots, including Amazon Music and Spotify, if you want to try there. You can follow me at Ken Napzok or go to my website, kennapzok.com, for more. And Joseph, they're going to want to follow your website because, hey, pretty soon, sooner than later, we all might be getting back up to real comedy stages again, yeah?
That's right. And if I even attend a comedy show in an audience, maybe I'll post that on my website just for the thrill. And maybe I'll post it on my website when I'm going to go out and have a drink. All coming soon. Yeah, so if you want to follow any of my various comedy adventures, you can find me on social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok as @Joseph Scrimshaw. And then my website for upcoming shows and comedy albums and all sorts of stuff like that is josephscrimshaw.com.
Go to Joseph's TikTok so you could see what I would describe as the death of the desire to open up toys and how you deal with it.
A celebration of not letting go.
Not letting go. Hey, it's a good one there. So for all the characters who have come and gone and left us with great lessons and occasional hurt, but always hope, peace, and purpose, including you, Nanta, this has been a fun episode. Star Wars has been ranked.